Your money is dying. It might as well be monopoly money in your pocket because literally every second of every day, the purchasing power of your dollars are eroding. You don't believe me? Check this out. This is a chart from the Federal Reserve Bank. And as you can see, starting in about 1913, that's when this chart starts, which is ironically the same time that the IRS and the Federal Reserve were established. But you can see, even though there are periods of increase, the overall trend over time is the purchasing power of the dollars in your pocket have dwindled to almost zero. That's a big problem. And that's why a lot of people liken your dollars to melting ice cubes. They're literally melting away quickly over time. So, what can you do about it? We're going to talk about that. So, stick around to the end. And if you like this type of content, make sure you like or subscribe. But before we get into the dying of the dollar, let's talk about what money is. Money has been around for millennia. The concept of exchanging value has been around for about as long as we have records, going back almost 130,000 years when folks bartered. I have cattle, you have corn, let's trade because I need corn and you need cattle type of thing. So barter has always been, even up to today, a medium of exchange. But money has taken many forms since 130,000 BCE in Africa. Since then, money has been grain, seashells, salt, where we get the word salary, livestock, other metals that aren't gold or silver, copper, iron, bronze, large stone discs, tobacco, whale's teeth, and now today, paper money, and in some cases, gold and silver bullion or coins. Money is essentially three things: a medium of exchange, a store of value, or a unit of account. Based on that chart from before, the dollars that you and I have in our pockets really aren't doing a good job of storing value because their value is decreasing over time. But another definition that I really want you to consider when you're thinking about what money is: money represents the value of work. It's a way to measure, transfer, and exchange effort, time, and resources. So you exchange your energy, you get money, you take that money, and then you exchange it for other goods and services that people use their energy to create. When you go to your job, you take your intellectual energy, you take your physical energy, you take your spiritual energy, all of these forms of energy, and you use them to produce something at your job. In exchange, your employer gives you money or currency that you go and use to spend in the economy. So the energy that you use is represented by your dollars. So now that we've unpacked really briefly what money is, let's talk about what the most long-standing form and probably the most commonly understood and agreed upon type of money, and that's gold and silver bullion. It's been used throughout history for thousands of years to exchange goods and services, particularly in its role as coinage. Most people today don't whip out silver coins or gold coins when they go to Walmart. However, there are still a few countries that accept or recognize gold and silver bullion as legal tender. The United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, China, Singapore, and Zimbabwe are all on that list. If you're in the United States, there are a few states actually that recognize gold and silver as sound money. Those states are Utah, Wyoming, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arizona, West Virginia, Tennessee, Missouri, Idaho, and Florida. But why is gold seen as money? Why silver? Why bronze? Why platinum? For the sake of this conversation, I'll just stick to gold, since that is the most commonly used precious metal when it comes to using it as money. So what makes gold so special? Well, there actually are quite a few things that many consider or many think makes gold intrinsically valuable. Number one, it is scarce, but not so rare that you can't use it as money. It takes quite a bit of energy and money to pull it out of the ground and refine it. You have to exchange quite a bit of energy in order to produce the type of gold that we can use as money. So there's that energy thing. It's representing energy. It's durable. It doesn't corrode, it doesn't rust, and it doesn't tarnish. Gold is virtually indestructible. Gold is malleable and ductile, meaning you can hammer it into very thin sheets or you can stretch it into long, thin cords. You can manipulate gold to many uses because it's soft, but it's also super strong. It's conductive. It's an excellent conductor of heat and electricity. It's non-toxic. Because of these properties, it's used in electronics, aerospace, medicine, jewelry, and even religious ceremonial objects. And it's also aesthetically pleasing. I think most people would look at a gold watch or some nice earrings and think that they look pleasing to the eye. So in addition to all of its inherent use cases, it looks nice. Back to the United States specifically. Because of gold's value, for all the reasons I just listed, the dollars that were used from 1941 to 1971 were actually backed by gold, meaning you could take the $20 bill in your pocket, you could go to your local bank or the treasury and say, I want $20 worth of gold, and you could get $20 worth of gold. That bill in your pocket had value because of what was backing it. That's a really interesting concept to lean in on, knowing that at one point those paper dollars really represented value in the form of gold. But wait, there's something you really need to know. The dollars that we have now weren't the first edition of the dollar, and especially fiat currency, which I'll get to in a minute. The first dollar was the Continental dollar, and that was from 1775 to 1781. Then we had the Confederate dollar from 1861 to 1865. We won't get into the weeds, but the point is neither one of those dollars exists anymore because of hyperinflation. So many of those dollars were printed that at some point they were worthless because there was too many of them in circulation. And if you've been following this channel, you've been hearing me kind of espouse on, hey, if you have a lot of a thing, generally its value decreases because it's readily available everywhere. And as things become scarcer and more rare, their value increases. Hence the value of gold, hence the value of precious stones that we covet. Even though those dollars, the Continental dollar and the Confederate dollar, even though they were fiat currencies, meaning they weren't backed by gold, you couldn't go and exchange your dollars for gold, even though they collapsed violently and caused a lot of civil unrest and upheaval, the United States didn't learn their lesson. And on August 15th, 1971, President Nixon announced that the US dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. The dollar was taken off the gold standard. And at that point, our dollars went from money to fiat currency. And there's a big difference. Those two words can't be used interchangeably. Money has inherent value. Fiat currency is really just dollars printed. Monopoly money. Now, fiat currency has a lifespan. And I started this video talking about how your dollars are dying. The average lifespan of a fiat currency is 27 years. I repeat, 27 years. Now, the saving grace for the current fiat dollar, because we're well past 27 years from its inception in 1971, is that the US dollar is the global reserve currency. So that's a special tier of fiat that we'll talk about in another video. But the point is, global reserve fiat currencies also have a lifespan. Looking at the chart on your screen, you'll see global reserve currencies prior. See, Portugal was 80 years, Spain 110, the Netherlands 80 years, France 95, the British pound for 105 years. So the average lifespan of a global reserve currency is about 90 years. There's a nuance that I really want to make sure that I lean in on and that I convey clearly so that you can understand the urgency of the right now. The average lifespan of a global reserve currency prior to the US dollar was 94 years. The US dollar has been around in this form since Bretton Woods. So that's 1944. So the current US dollar is about 80 years old. However, about halfway through August 15th, 1971, the dollar was removed from the gold standard. So instead of it being backed by gold, from that point, it was a debt note backed by nothing. The contrast between the other global reserve currencies that they also, all of them, went from backing by either gold or silver, so they actually had a backing by a precious metal. But as the empire began to wane, whether it's Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, Netherlands, as the empire began to die, they switched their currency from precious metal backed, gold or silver, to fiat backed by nothing. And that was a part of them basically collapsing in terms of being the dominant power in the world. So the United States, the dollar, has been off of the gold standard now for 54 years. Remember, all of the other countries that had global reserve currencies, they didn't switch to fiat until their country was in grave danger. They were already on the way out as the world's superpower. And the United States has been off of the gold standard now for over 5 decades. Let that sink in. Moving from a gold standard was basically a signal that the country was in grave trouble. And we've been in that zone for 54 years as of the recording of this video. You may be listening to this and thinking, okay, Damon, well, it's been working for 54 years. What are you worried about? I'm not worried because the scriptures say, be anxious for nothing. But I do think this is a critical moment. And the thing about fiat currencies, and you remember from the chart before how it's really been gradually, and some might argue precipitously, declining in value over time. What typically happens at the end is it just goes straight down, boom, and explodes and ends in a hyperinflationary event. Hyperinflation, when the prices of goods and services that you buy every day go up incredible amounts in very short periods of time. So let's use some examples. You may have heard of the Weimar Republic in Germany from 1921 to 1923. When their currency was collapsing, prices were doubling every 3.7 days. So if bread was $5 on Monday, by Thursday, it was $16 to $17. You may have also heard of the Zimbabwe crash from 2007 to 2009, where it got so bad with their hyperinflation that literally every 24 hours, prices were doubling. Could you imagine every day you go to the gas pump and it's double what it was the day before? $3 to $6 to $12 to $24 to $48, etc. Who could keep up with that? Do I know when this dollar that we currently use is going to have that hyperinflationary event? I don't. No one knows for certain. But what we do know for certain is that it is going to have that moment. There will be a moment when all of a sudden you look up and your dollar is even more worthless than the first chart that I showed you. And prices are doubling at a rate that'll be almost impossible for you to keep up with. So what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it? The moral of the money is we need to do our best to take our melting ice cubes, the dollars that are in our pocket, that each and every day are worth less and less, and exchange those dollars for assets that each and every day their value is increasing relative to the dollar. Assets like stocks, crypto, real estate, buying businesses, artwork, precious metals. Gold and precious metals are considered more of store of wealth, whereas crypto and stocks are considered more risk assets. Real estate may be somewhere in the middle. Often the argument I hear is, Damon, I just don't have the money to invest. And I empathize with that, and we've all been there. And so my response would be, what can you cut out? Is there something in your lifestyle that you can exchange? Maybe eating out, maybe the new pair of shoes, maybe the new outfit, etc., and instead buy some assets. The other argument, which is valid, that I hear is, well, how can I buy a stock? How can I buy a share of Google or Tesla? They're already multiple hundreds of dollars. And I don't have that to start with investing. And that's a valid response. And to that, I would say, well, maybe consider other assets in the blockchain or crypto space where you can buy increments as small as you want. You could buy $20, $5, $10 of Bitcoin right now. And recently, a lot of stocks are now being tokenized. So you can even buy tokens on the blockchain that represent stocks, and you can buy little pieces of them instead of having to buy the whole stock. In the scriptures, it says, he that has, more will be given to them. So I really believe that when we make an intentional effort to amass wealth and to buy assets, then we are given more provision to continue so. In the parable of the talents, the faithful servants who used their master's money and doubled it when their master came back, he gave the increase to the servant who had the most from the beginning and then doubled that money. It's a law within this realm that we exist. And so we have a choice whether we're going to leverage the law or not. So the moral of the money, again, is exchange your time and energy for fiat and then exchange that for assets that grow in wealth. Not financial advice, but this is what I do. And I hope that that will help you as well. And if you stuck around to the end, here's another bonus. Take a look at this chart, also from the Federal Reserve. Same as what I showed you before, except it's also mapping Bitcoin in that orange line. Notice the difference between the value of fiat currency and the value of Bitcoin. It's phenomenal, the difference. So I'm not saying buy Bitcoin again. This is not financial advice. It's at all-time highs, so it's probably not the best place to invest. Could be, could not be. Some people say Bitcoin is going to $1 million. But my point is to exchange your fiat that's dying for an asset that's flying. And that's the moral of the money. Until next time, peace. And if you really like this content, like, share, subscribe, because I'm going to keep it cranking.